Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the summer edition of the Design Talks that the Design Department of Tecnológico de Monterrey, Mexico City region has prepared for you. Today, we have a wonderful guest, which I will present in a minute. Please don't forget that tomorrow at 11 a.m., we have another talk prepared to you with Marco Guadarrama, user experience researcher at IKEA, so please register to have access to it. So today's guest is Phil Balagtas, who is founder and president of the Design Futures Initiative. He will be presenting to all of us about his trajectory, talk about speculative design, and other topics of interest. As usual, the dynamics of this talk consist on Phil presenting for us for about 30 to 40 minutes. No rush, Phil. And the rest of the session will be reserved for Q&A. The microphones won't be enabled, so if you have some questions for Phil, please write them down in the chat box and I will gladly read them for him. Welcome, Phil, and I will let you introduce yourself a little bit more, and we will listen to everything that you have prepared for us. I am sure that more people will be joining us later during this session. So welcome, and you can start now, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Miguel, and Tecnológico de Monterrey University for inviting me today on this summer day. Nice to see everybody. Hope you're all doing well. I will be starting my presentation now. And just give me a second to set up the screen share. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Zoom by now, so please familiarize yourself with the chat. I might be asking some questions and asking for some responses through the chat window later on during the presentation. Again, yes, so my name is Phil Balagtas. I'm the founder and president of the Design Futures Initiative. We are a nonprofit based in San Francisco, California. That's where I am today. I am a designer by trade. My undergraduate degree is in graphic design. However, before I graduated from school, I was very interested in designing websites. So I've been designing websites and experiences, digital experiences since 1999. And then I moved to San Francisco in about 2007 and got my master's in design thinking and interaction design. Most recently, I worked for General Electric Aviation. I was the design director for the GE Aviation Digital Group. I was designing dashboards for airlines and aviation manufacturers. And then most recently at McKinsey & Company. I was at McKinsey for about almost three and a half years. I just left McKinsey just recently, but I was working with a number of different corporations. I've worked with oil and gas, again, aviation and airlines, retail, industrial companies, utilities, pretty much the whole spectrum. Like I said, I'm also the president and founder of this nonprofit, which hopefully we'll have some time to talk about a little bit later. But I want to start with a short video by a company that you might know of named Apple. This was a vision video that they produced back in 1987. And I'm just going to play a short snippet of it for you. You can find this online. It's about maybe 11 minutes long, but I'm just going to show you a short clip.
Your graduate research team in Guatemala, just checking in. Robert Jordan, a second semester junior, requesting a second extension on his term paper. And your mother reminding you about your father's
surprise birthday party next Sunday.
Today you have a faculty
So I'm going to pause it there, but as you might have noticed, this gentleman who's a professor or an educator of some sort is using this device. If you can type in the chat some of the technologies that you saw in that clip or that you see right here on the screen, just name them. Mail Siri, of course, yes. There's some very obvious components or features of this device, things that we're probably very familiar with today. It's a touchscreen tablet that folds, and I think most recently pre-Zoom, yes, it was pre-Zoom. It's a folding tablet, which doesn't exist. Well, it exists today because of Samsung, but we're still trying to get it right. There's also a camera, and there is the assistant, but there's one very key infrastructure technology that makes this all work, and that would be the internet. In 1987, the internet was not commercially available. So Apple at this time was really thinking about the future of technology. and thinking about what might an educator use in the future. It doesn't say what future, but it's a future. Voice recognition, calendar assistant check. Yes, that's right. A lot of different things. And if you watch the video, the longer version of the video, you'll see that he uses a lot of different features for connecting over the internet, sending images. And we don't know for sure if this actually became, what we know today as the iPad, but we can see examples of what it inspired Apple to do over the next 10, 20 years. Speculating on the type of usage and behaviors that we might face with technology. But speculation has been around for quite some time. Here's a series of postcards started by Jean-Marc Coté. I think this is a French gentleman. Him and a few artists put together these cards, and they used to come in cigarette boxes, and later they became postcards. But they were depicting in 1900s the year 2000. So here's a newfangled barber fishing for seagulls. I'm not sure why you're fishing for seagulls underwater. I think during the time of this, there was a huge inspiration around water, because there's a lot of these cards actually have to do with the ocean at school. So we're not quite there yet, but I think with Elon Musk's Neuralink, we might kind of get to something that looks like this. But again, in the 1900s, they were thinking about what's the next century going to look like as far as technology, and what are the different types of applications that might exist in different situations. And this is generally what we call futures thinking. Now, futures thinking is really an amalgamation of different types of disciplines and methodologies for us to think about the future. How do we really understand what's coming down the road? And as futurists, I guess I can call myself a futurist. I've been doing this for quite some time now. We don't tell you what's going to happen. We don't predict the future, but we talk about the possibilities. And I've tried to define it in different ways, but here's one definition I've been giving. And really, futures thinking is a way to investigate those possibilities and to prepare us for what might be an inconvenient challenge, such as the pandemic, or other types of risks a business might face, and helps us to facilitate a more responsible path into that future. Once we understand those challenges and the opportunities, how do we plan a strategy forward? And we do this by looking at today and in the past. We look at the trends and what's happening today, and we create scenarios or prototypes like the Apple Knowledge Navigator, an immersive experience, so that we can stimulate a discourse about what we're going to do about today and create those preferable futures. You might have seen this diagram at some point. This is called the futures cone, also known as the Voros cone. I think Mr. Voros is the first one who created this. But this is what we show people when we start to talk about the future. We say, the future is really, it's infinite. There's infinite possibilities. And if you look at it as if you're shining a flashlight into a dark room, in the center of that flashlight, where the center part of the beam would be where it says probable, things that we know are going to happen, that are pretty destined. And then as you move further, as you're shining the flashlight, it gets a little bit dimmer on the outside. The possibilities get a little bit dimmer. Beyond the cone of possibility are things that probably won't happen, such as teleportation in this day and age. Maybe in the next 100 years or so, or if there's some great innovation, we'll be able to do that. But like dragons and lightsabers, those are impossible. But we can see that the future is very, very bright and very open, and there's many types of possibilities. So I'm going to show you a few examples about speculative design. And all speculative design is really just speculating about the future through the lens of design, through artifacts and objects and experiences. This is a project from the Royal College of Art by Susanna Soares. It's called Bees. And if you're not familiar with bees, they actually have the sensibility to detect diseases. They can perform health checkups and they can monitor fertility. So this device is a glass tube. She created this with some bees, and this might be for expecting mothers. And the bees would kind of sense the hormones to tell the mother if they're fertile or detect other types of diseases she might have. Now, this actual object didn't totally exist today, but we can speculate on what the use might be in the future. This is Human Hyena by Paul Gong. This is a very recent project, also from the Royal College of Art. He was looking at hyenas. The hyena's digestive system is very strong. A hyena can eat almost anything, much like most scavengers in the world. But his proposition was, what if you could harness the hyena's digestive system and use it for humans to be able to digest any types of foods or meats? And so these are just a series of objects that he came up with that might harness that capability. Of course, now they're just 3D printed objects, but it's speculating and provoking the discussion of what if we could do this? Because speculative design and futurist thinking always asks, what if? What if this was possible? What would we do? This is another project that I like to show. This one's called Transfigurations by Aggie Haynes. On the left is a child that's been designed to work in longer hours and hotter temperatures. The folds on the skin allow the heat to dissipate from the body very quickly. On the right, this child's middle toe has been removed, and this is due to maybe allergies. There's been some studies about the hookworm, that the hookworm inserted through this hole could actually help this child mitigate allergies throughout its life. So we can do this today, but would we do it if we could? And so it starts to bring up questions around ethics as well. Julian Tauvel, he's also a designer, a speculative designer, has created a series of cosmetic products. The first one, a silver-based cream protecting yourself from thermal cameras. So for people who are very paranoid about being watched by cameras out in the world, they could use this. On the right, a gene editing care based on celebrities and influencers' DNA. So this one's labeled Bella Hadid, but you can imagine something like Kanye West's DNA gene editor. And again, you can go to this website and try to buy one of these products, but it says it won't be available for 30 years. Again, the experience of actually thinking that this is real starts to provoke questions about what if we could do this if we had it. Maiden Levy, also a very recent, this is a student project from the Bezalel Academy of Art in Jerusalem. This is called Neo Fruit. So what he did is he created these silicon-based fruits, and he's promoting an idea called 4D printing. So he, of course, 3D printed all of these fruits and injected them with vitamins and nutrients, similar to the types of vitamins and nutrients you would get from fruits. And the fourth dimension is time. So it's 3D printed, it creates the silicon case, and as he injects the liquid starts to take the shape and form of its container, thus the time, the 4D fruit. But very beautiful imagery, and he even created a commercial around this that looks very real and very contemporary to kind of present that experience that, oh, this might be something that we can do today. Because speculative design can be something that you pull from the future into today if you really want it. And design doesn't necessarily have to be available and in service today. It can be used to explore how the world is and how we want it to be in the future. It could be next year or the next 5 years or 10 years and beyond. And they could just be used as both provocation or a North Star, something that we really want to happen, and we can start to drive our agenda towards that. So those are just a number of examples. I'll tell you a little bit about what I did most recently at McKinsey & Company. Within the design group, I worked there for 3.5 years, like I said, and I knew I wanted to bring futures thinking into the consultancy, but I wasn't quite sure how. And I'm writing a book about this right now because as more people find out about futures thinking, they want to bring it back to their workplace and their corporation. There's always questions about where to start. And where I started at McKinsey was creating a newsletter called Signals in Design. So this is something that I call like a free, cheap, and easy way to get something started. It could be futures thinking, it could be design thinking, it could be service design, it could be a new methodology. Whatever it is that you're trying to promote internally, try to find the cheapest and easiest way to do that. And this was we did this by creating a newsletter just for the designers. And we wanted to have some real data. So we looked at different types of trends in the marketplace to try and figure out what is it we want to speculate on. Well, we did some work and found out a lot of information about digital identity. So the idea of not having paper identification cards, but everything being digital and connected online, all of your data being connected online, artificial intelligence, which we called on-demand intelligence, recognition devices such as cameras and Siri and all sorts of other devices that we have in our world and smart home that are collecting information about us, and then biome and gene therapy. So gene therapy is maturing now, but biome therapy is still in its infancy. So we're starting to understand the connection between the brain and the gut. And we're trying to figure out, how do we understand it and actually modify it? So we looked at all of these. We looked at how much market investment was happening in the world around these different technologies and trends. And we created an entire ecosystem of products. In each of these quadrants, you can see, there's the biome toilet, which would collect information from you, an internal data collection pill. They're actual pills that you can swallow, and not only will it take camera footage of your insides, but also collect data as it goes down. And you can actually embed sensors on organs permanently to send data out to your healthcare physician. And then, advanced AI. This was one of the speculative designs we had, omnibiotic restaurants. So omni being many, biotic meaning all the multiple biomes inside of your body. What if we could redesign the restaurant experience? So that these two people are sitting at the restaurant, and what if you could take that stick on the left, put it in your mouth, and it would measure the entire chemical and biomic signature of your body, and it would send that information back to the kitchen and create a menu for you, specifically bespoke and designed for your particular signature. Again, based on theoretical science, but you could probably do this today if you wanted to. So I'm going to move into some methodologies. There are so many examples. I wish I wish we had more time, but I'd love to share them. But I do want to talk a little bit about some basic methods on how we do this. Now, I might have mentioned the word strategic foresight, and I've said speculative design. Strategic foresight is a very mature discipline. It's been around for many, many years. You can take strategic foresight classes in business schools. And really, it's a set of principles and methods for analyzing trends, creating scenarios, and figuring out what the world's going to be like. But if you couple that analytic thinking with design practice, such as design thinking and speculative design and futures thinking, you can have a visual and immersive experience to go along with all of the trend analysis and make a much richer picture of what the world's going to be like. And this is what I've been pushing in corporate America and when I was at the consultancy, is that this type of approach can be very, very powerful for businesses to really help shape their futures. Businesses today are very worried about their bottom line, their return on investment, and not very resilient, as we've seen businesses and ecosystems fall apart during the pandemic. So it looks pretty much like design thinking. We do research, we talk to users, and then we plan out scenarios. That's the thing that's a little bit different. Scenarios could be like, well, what if everything goes good? Or what if everything goes bad? Or what if everything goes so-so? We create these worlds where different universes happen. And within those universes, we can create speculative designs and then create a strategy towards one of those worlds. So I'm not sure how many people saw the survey, but before this class started, we sent a survey out to ask people, what's one word that describes the future of education? And a few of the answers were technology, of course, mystery, evolution, change, innovation, collaboration, distance learning, and hope. None of these are wrong. They're very good perspectives. One thing we do when we think about the future, and this is what I've seen a lot over the many years of teaching futures classes and teaching others how to think about the future and how to create strategies, is that we take today and we project it into tomorrow. Nothing wrong with that. But as you can see, there's lots of different inputs that we can actually include in that to figure out what tomorrow is going to look like. Hope and collaboration and distance learning, these are all things that we're sort of experiencing today and that we want, and we try to project those into the future. And it's good to have and start with that perspective, but we can also use trends from other industries, trends from outside the world, from other countries, to figure out how is that going to influence distance learning in the next 5 to 10 years. As we saw with the Jean-Marc Coté visions, some of them were spot on, and some of them were a little strange, such as this whale bus. Again, I told you earlier, there's a lot of images of people in the oceans. Here's a race in the Pacific. Apparently this is underwater. So I don't know what the interest was with the oceans, but I wish there was more of that interest today. And I'm not sure if we'd be riding fish around today, but that looks like a lot of fun. Again, so some of these might have been off, but they're good projections for the next 100 years. I mean, 100 years is very, very far. Typically in business, we don't look beyond 5 or 10 years, actually. 10 years is the max, because 5 years, it feels like you can get there in 5 years. There's a lot of probability that exists there. But in the next 10 years, you start to go beyond, you start to lose a little bit of grounding on what could be possible. 20 years, even harder. If you can remember the last 10 years of your life, let's say, what was it? It's 2021, 2011 was a very different time. The iPhone had only existed for 4 years or so. They might've been an iPhone 3 or 4 at that time. And if you could think about how much the world has changed in the last 10 years, now with the exponential rate of change today, you can think about the next 10 years as being even more dramatic. So another methodology here is called the futures wheel. And this is one that I use a lot. And it's the most flexible method. If there's anything that you take away from this talk, and if you are a designer or a strategist or just want to think about the future, this is probably one of the most powerful tools you can use. We sometimes call it the implications wheel. What you do is you have something in the middle. It could be a trend, it could be an event, it could be a technology, it could be a person, it could be the existence of something, the existence of space tourism. And the next circle you draw from that is the direct implication of whatever that topic is. The direct implication of space tourism might be, millionaires are capitalizing on that, and the actual space tourism industry is only populated by millionaires. The next circle out is the indirect implication, or you can also think about it as the second order consequence. Well, if only millionaires are spending all their money on space tourism, then they're not spending their money on saving the world. And then, other things happen, and they can be negative consequences or they can be positive consequences. And once you start to create this map, you start to create an entire ecosystem of implications, all sorts of impacts and consequences. And you can start to really understand the world and unpack things. If you go down to second order, third order, and fourth order consequences, you start to uncover blind spots. You start to see all the things that you didn't think about before you did this exercise. So this is a futures wheel on the coronavirus outbreak, done last year. I think it was last summer sometime. I don't see the date. But let's just look at this thread right here. So COVID-19, the direct impact is challenges to medical organizations, resources, and equipment. An indirect impact, or a second order consequence, is challenges to the local, regional, and international emergency systems. Another indirect or third order consequence might be the fall of political leaders. And then a fourth consequence is international relations and trust is challenged, and we have an increase or decrease in fragmentation. So you can see there's this knock-on effect between consequences, but it doesn't have to stop there. It doesn't have to go in a straight line. There are other implications that could happen. Risks of hoarding, rise of black markets, domestic challenges to trust in local or national institutions and systems. And one down there, increased domestic social unrest and challenges to democracy. This was before Black Lives Matter and all the other social movements that erupted towards the end of 2020. And again, it doesn't matter that they're right or wrong, but this starts to unearth all of those potential possibilities. How do we prepare for everything? We can't prepare for everything, but based on a number of prioritization activities that you would apply to this based on what you think is actually really viable or not, you can start to prioritize how do you protect your business? How do you protect your ecosystem? Or how do you take advantage of new opportunities and challenges and address them? And so it can be very, very powerful. You can use this on just like going to the store. Do I want to go to the store today? Well, if I do, I might get hit by a car. But if I get hit by a car, I might get paid by insurance. And if I get paid by insurance, I'll be able to buy that boat. You could use it on anything. And I use this quite a bit in my life. Another question that we asked in the survey was, name an emerging technology or process that had a significant impact on education. And some of the answers were digital marketing, material, machine learning and artificial intelligence, Zoom, video and streaming, online platforms and virtual classes, much like everyone else has been taking a lot of virtual classes these days, virtual reality of 3D printing. These are all correct. These are all technologies that have really impacted the way that we learn, the way we teach, the way we connect today. And again, but one thing to also think about is that technology only plays one part of the puzzle. There's policy, there's people, there's social and cultural influences. There's what's happening on TikTok, there's what's happening on Facebook, and there's all kinds of influencing factors that could change the way our future unfolds with these technologies. And we need to start to look at that and prepare for it so that we're not blindsided or taken advantage of, or make a mistake and potentially hurt people. So if we think about the futures wheel and the thread, let's do a quick exercise here in the chat. And let's just think about virtual classes. I'm sure everyone here has either taught or been on a virtual class recently. What's a direct implication of virtual classes? You can just type it up in the chat. I've given an example here. Less attention due to Zoom fatigue. I know everyone's fatigued from Zoom, but what is another direct implication of virtual classes in the world? You can just type it in the chat. Learning less, yeah. Due to low attention spans, or moving less. Multitasking between home chores and classes. Yep. For some of those parents that are out there. Oh gosh, I'm sure there's lots of implications with people who have families. The need for internet or lack of it becomes apparent, right? What about right? You can record classes and study. No, that's a positive implication. Cat interference. Yes, the cat and children. Reduced attention span. Social skills decrease. Lack of communication and personal relationships. Yep. Constant distractions, lack of eye. Oh gosh, you guys are pros at this, right? Less participation, right? No escape to a personal life. It feels like there's a lot of stress from Zoom, from virtual class right now. Great. Let's try another one. What's an indirect implication to some of this, to virtual classes? You can either use the thing that you typed or come up with a new one. What's another indirect implication due to virtual classes? So if you're easily distracted or less participation, what happens then after that? Decrease in formal college enrollment. Oof, let's not say that here. In fact, some of these also can be an indirect consequence. The lack of eye contact. Maybe you take that out into the world. When you're actually allowed to go back in the world and socialize with people, you don't have a lot of direct eye contact, or you're always looking for a mirror because you're always looking at yourself in the Zoom panel. Back pain. Yes, I had to get a special chair last year. Saving money on gas. That is definitely a positive indirect implication. Obesity. Changes in diets, your movement. I think someone said movement earlier. Most of the population is learning to use technology. Now that's a positive one. Sedentarianism, yeah. I've been definitely sedentary. Wanting to learn other things not related to your degree. That's great. Hopefully this is one of those classes. All right. Those are good. Those are awesome. But as you can see, this is a very powerful framework for just thinking about possibilities, right? Both positive and negative, and the second, third order consequences of what might happen. And just to kind of create the map of possibilities so that you might be able to prepare for it or avoid certain things. Or if you're a business or institution and you can see like how people are responded, your customers responded, you can start to prepare for those negative things that might happen. You don't have to spend a ton of money on creating that, but you can start to create new policies or new products or features or offerings to serve that potential risk, because some of those potential risks, if we don't think about them, will blow up and potentially put us out of business. Introverts are the new mainstream. That's a good one. Yay for introverts. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Design Futures Initiative. We are a nonprofit here in San Francisco, and it was really born out of my interest in speculative and critical design. I was really, really fascinated with it, and I really felt like this is a very important strategic tool. So back in 2015, we started a meetup here in San Francisco. A meetup is just a club or a meeting, And I just wanted to see if people were interested in this. And I invited speakers to talk, and that became our first Speculative Futures chapter. We call our network of communities the Speculative Futures chapters. We also started a conference called Primer. We're priming people for the future back in 2017. We just had our fifth conference, Primer 21, just a few weeks ago, I think last week. Virtually, completely virtual and online. It used to be in person, but last year during pandemic, we switched to online. And so that was very good for all the people around the world who want to access the content. And then we have our own programs. We've worked with the United Nations. We work with corporations. We also have our student advising and a kids program. We're working with children who are at risk. So children who were growing up in challenging neighborhoods surrounded by drugs and gangs and guns and violence, and teaching them to think about the future, that their future does not have to be in a gang, or that they have to sell drugs, that they can have multiple futures and they can actually create strategies to get to those futures. And now we've changed that program. We're evolving it to work with students with disabilities, with children with disabilities, kids that are in hospitals who are challenged with chronic disease, and teaching them how to think positively about their future. We've grown quite a bit, and as of this month, we have over 74 chapters around the world. Just to give you an idea of how fast we've grown, in 2018, we had 6 chapters, and it's 2021 now, and we have over 75, and we get a new chapter application almost every other week. So we're spreading quite a bit, and it's very humbling and beautiful to see so many people who are interested not only in speculative design, but in the idea that we can create our own future through these methodologies, that we can not just help businesses, but help students and help the needy and people in emerging cities really think about, how do I create a strategy towards the future that I want? So if you're interested in any of this, here's a few books. A lot of people like to take a picture of the screen. Speculative Everything is by Anthony Dunphy and Arabi. They are the sort of founders of speculative and critical design, born out of the Royal College of Art in London. Extrapolation Factory Operators Manual, very good book, lots of case studies, but also lots of methodologies. What is it? There's another book that just came out, which is not on here, called How to Future by Scott Smith. Pick that one up if you get a chance. But you can see there's a mixture here of futurists and foresight books and speculative design. Again, we have been thinking about trying to merge as many methodologies and approaches to help us really think about the future better. And everyone's got a little bit of something to offer. So I hope you enjoyed that and you're interested in it. Here's my contact information if you'd like to shout out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and hope you all are enjoying your summer.
Thank you very, very much, Bill. And well, right now we will start with the Q&A session. So please write down your questions in the chat box, and I will be reading them to you, Bill. Actually, well, to start triggering these questions, I will ask you a very simple one, a big observation that I made, and actually later on I heard something that is related to it. But do you consider that speculation usually takes the negative path more frequently?
The negative path?
Yeah.
I think yes and no. Yes, traditionally within the last 10 years. And I think that's due to what has been in the media and entertainment industry. We've got things like The Terminator and Aliens and Minority Report. And again, these are narratives in film, which they have to have some sort of like conflict. And so a lot of people get really interested in the dystopic future. But as a community, we're trying to change that narrative and be more positive and more optimistic and try to think of a utopia, not necessarily utopia, but something more like a protopia, which is not bad, not good, but something that we really just want, and get away from the polarizing aspect of it. So yes, but I don't disagree that negative futures are a bad thing. I think that people should think about consequences, good and bad, so that we're prepared for the bad ones.
Yeah, also, I mean, to me, it was very interesting that we were talking about the situation of these children that were having these very harsh moments, and then how you can use these different strategies to help them think in a positive way. So I have here a question from Jose, and he's saying, about the future's will, how important is to balance our own intuition and fact to come up with good indirect ideas?
I think it's good to have both. Again, the future is real. It's an exercise to just kind of create the map of possibilities. It can be based on something that is real, and of course, it's more believable when it is real. But if you're saying things like, like people with lightsabers are going to attack the Capitol or something like that, but I think intuition is a good part of futures, because again, we don't actually know the future. It's based on how we feel today and how we want to feel tomorrow. So I think it's very important. I think that I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but as far as like balance, it's just good to have everything out on the table. You can do a prioritization exercise on it later to figure out what's important, when what's viable or not. But getting as many questions on the table as possible is great.
Yeah, and well, Jose also asks how to have a good intuition in this case.
When we talk about foresight work, we talk about scanning the horizon, and that's scanning everything that you know within your purview. And a good scanner, a good trend hunter will be looking at news, will be looking at social media, they'll be looking at everything going on, reading papers, reading articles, white papers. And I think the way to have good intuition is to really flood yourself with as much information about whatever it is you're thinking about. It's good to just kind of be connected, understand what's going in the world, and understand what's fake news and not also, but to actually have a perspective, which is how intuition is born, is to just really do good trend scanning. Understand what are different people saying, and also get outside of your industry and get outside of like your country, because people in one country might have a different perspective on the same topic that you do, and you want to have that different perspective. If you're only thinking about like, we're always looking at it from an American view, using just American media, that's not really good intuition around what could happen, because there's so many factors from the outside world that could influence what's going on.
Yeah, and also I find it very interesting, mostly because you were saying, well, before, the speculative design or speculative thinking is about thinking about the future through different lenses. You have these lenses of design, but you can get out of it, especially because design is so multidisciplinary, and to look through all of these. So there's another question from Valerie. She's saying, how to choose which idea to develop?
That's a very good question. And there's a little bit of intuition in that as well. I'll speak to it from a business context, because this is what I've had to deal with recently. When working with a client as a consultancy, there's always this large group of ideas. Again, there's a number of ways, a number of exercises you can do to help prioritize. It can be, how much money do we have, or how technically capable are we to build that? So if I'm a car company and I want to invest in autonomous cars, and I don't know anything about AI, I'm going to have to invest in AI. Do I really want to do that? Do I have enough money to do that? Do I have the technical need to do that, or desire to do that? Then I would choose based on that. Sometimes with businesses, it's based on an internal just desire, which can also be called intuition. If a company really thinks like, okay, AI is where we really want to go, whether or not we can afford it, they're going to want to go there because they really have this intuition that this is the future and this is what we need to be doing. But other than that, there's lots of, you can prioritize through voting, through what you think is going to have the most impact on your business, yourself, whatever it might be, what has the greatest gains and the less losses, what has the most market investment, how many startups are actually investing in the same idea. Is there a lot of competition, or is there so little competition that you want to be a pioneer in that idea and you think you can do it? There's lots of different ways to do that.
Well, thank you. And Mariana has another question. How can I make a living out of speculative design?
I get that question quite a bit. And I'm sorry to tell you that there's not many job roles out there that says looking for speculative designer. But what I can tell you is that this is this industry, this community, this practice is growing very rapidly over the last 10 years or so. I think within the next 5 years or so, there will be those job roles that'll pop up. But if you're really interested in this work, and I think this is what's going to happen, is speculative design and futures thinking is not going to be the separate thing. I think we're all going to still continue to be designers with a futures mindset. where we'll be using futures. We'll be using lots of strategic foresight, and we'll be thinking strategically as designers. And it will just be, more holistic, more responsible designers, more ethical designers. And I would say, go out there and be a designer, learn these tools, go take a foresight class, go take a speculative design class, and bring it into your toolbox as a designer and do that work. Right now, the speculative designers are sort of a mix between strategists and product design and interaction design and UX research. They're all of these different roles are sort of using bits and pieces of it.
Okay, thank you. Ramiro Estrada, he's our dean actually of the region. He's saying, great lecture. Thank you very much, Phil. Very topical issues and radical thinking. Congratulations, great honor. And
Thank you.
well, here we have another question from Carlos Valdez. He says, how can you differentiate between trends and tendencies?
You'll have to explain what tendencies means, but there's lots of different terms also in the foresight world where you've got trends and you've got something called signals, and you've also got drivers and themes. Just to confuse you even more, maybe tendencies fits within one of those categories. But I guess the one thing to think about is when something is called a trend, we know it's a trend because it's happening in multiple places. And when it happens in multiple places and it has a momentum, we can finally say, okay, this is a signal. This is a signal of change. This is a signal that AI is actually going to become ubiquitous. It's a signal that autonomous cars are going to actually hit the road and be part of society in the next 5 or 10 years because so many people are invested in it. It's beyond just a pattern. It's an actual thing that's going to happen. It's got a lot of momentum. And if we look, we can look behind it and we can say, what's the driver behind that? And it's good to understand the difference between these things because you might be investing in what you think is a trend, but the actual driver that creates that trend is something else. It might be a cultural context that's driving it. And maybe you want to address the thing in the back, the driver, so that you can be successful and not just jump on the bandwagon and be another competitor in the market. And then there's themes. And themes are just groups of patterns of things. So there's a theme that autonomy, AI, machine learning, and different things is going to be a huge part of our technological society the next 5 or 10 years. That's a pretty broad theme. Autonomy is a broad theme. And then there are memes, which Jose said. Yeah, and memes are also a place you might think that, yeah, this is just for entertainment, but memes are also a good way of looking at culture. There's lots of different ways that people are creating memes or what they actually focus on that can tell you a little bit about what that society is thinking about. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we have some other questions just before starting with them. I think Carlos was talking when he was referring to tendencies to kind of more like an agenda that is being pushed by some industry or by something. How can you differentiate, you would say, or you would call a trend and something that is more like imposed?
Imposed. Oh God, that's great.
Trying to say this.
Okay. Well, thank you for the clarification. It's hard to tell because, I think I would do my research. If you suspect that something is not an actual trend and it's being imposed on you for no reason, that there's no actual data behind it, I would be suspicious to actually use that as something. So if it's like one company is building, robot dogs, well, I think there is one, but one company is building robot spiders, and we actually have no real reason that they're doing it, but they say that everyone's building robot spiders. Why don't we build a robot spider? If there's no actual data in the world to support something, then of course I think it's going to be a self-imposed agenda. I would just look really hard. I think the good thing about looking at futures, and I didn't discuss this today, but there's something called STEEP, STEEP. It stands for social, technological, environmental, economic, and political. And we use STEEP a lot to look at different dimensions of the world today, so we can truly understand all the different influencing drivers for something. So the social sphere, the technological sphere, what's technologies available, political sphere, environmental sphere, all of these things, and you can add other letters like values and other things, whatever it might be. So if you're suspicious of something that might be an agenda, I would look at the STEEP of it is it truly something that is holistically being driven by the world, by society, that actually is like, pumping into the world, or is it just like a soul thing? I hope
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And well, right now we have some two other questions, so maybe we can close this session with these other two. Mercedes is asking, what would you say to the ones that are into future thinking but are not designers? Would we need to add design skills into our toolbox?
I would say no, unless you're thinking about, if you're interested in being like the crafter of the speculative design. If you want to be able to like, design the knowledge navigator, then you could do that if that's interesting to you. But I think that futurist thinking is really a strategic tool. It's really a strategic mindset and perspective. And there's a lot of work that is necessary with really understanding the trends in the world, analyzing that, creating scenarios, and you can design the story of that future world without actually, doing all the, the graphic design and all that stuff, or creating a 3D product. You can tell that story, you can hire someone else to do it. So I would say no, unless you really want to.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, design diversifies a lot. So, it doesn't mean that you have to be an industrial designer, that you have to be a graphic designer, but there's only like a design way of thinking sometimes. So,
Yes.
uh,
Right.
yeah. So, well, we have this last question from Arturo Gil, and he's saying, how do you link futures thinking with circular design?
Are you talking about circular economy? Is that
Yeah, I'm sure he might be.
like, yes. Okay. I think they go very well together, because circular thinking, circular design, circular economy is really about kind of, the entire loop of, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but from cradle to grave, right? Thinking about all of the different impact that a product or a material or a resource might make as it moves its way through the world, and can you actually like recycle that thing? I apologize if I have bastardized that, if I've given you a really bad definition of that, but when you think about the impact of products on economies in the world, and how to really think about the impact of that on everything else, that's futures thinking, right? The life cycle of a particular product or a material is so long that you can actually map out over years of time, from cradle to grave, where this thing is going to go and how it's going to affect different people, different economies, different environments, the political system. Again, steep here. I'm talking about steep: social, cultural, technological. And you can look at all those dimensions and use that as a framework to understand what is impact having and how do we recycle this back into the system effectively. So I think that they're very useful for each other as well. Anything that has a long life cycle, or even a short life cycle. Again, this is what we're discovering with business, is that sometimes people think, oh, because it's futures, it only happens 5 and 10 years and beyond. So if we're not thinking about 5 or 10 years, then we don't need to be using that stuff. Incorrect. And I disagree, because you can use the futures wheel and steep on something today and look at tomorrow. It's actually even more accurate, because tomorrow is not very far away. So, in all sorts of short and long-term planning, these tools can be very, very powerful and very useful for analyzing, everything ahead.
Yeah, I mean, at the very end, is all about connecting the dots.
Right.
For today, for tomorrow, it's the same kind of strategies that you have to use.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much, Phil, for having this talk with us, for taking a little bit of your time to really interact with us. And well, I am sure that we will be seeing you very much soon here. We hope to invite you more frequently, and I am sure that there's still a lot of questions that a lot of the participants here are still processing. So thank you very much. I don't know if maybe Jose has something to say. If not, we can close the session. Jose, go on.
Well, great talk, Phil. I think I even learned new things today, that really excited me. And thank you also, Miguel, for, as always, facilitating this amazing talk. And thank you, everybody. There are like some familiar faces, some of them who I don't know who they are, which is also pretty nice. And yeah, thank you very much for sharing all of this, and also thank you for all the work that you do to share what speculative design and critical design and future thinking is through all the initiatives that you are behind too. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. See you soon.
Well, see you very soon. And well, a note for everybody else, just remember tomorrow we have another talk with Marco Guadarrama, who is also a researcher at IKEA. So if you have the time, just remember to register yourself and we will see each other tomorrow. So thank you.
User researcher at IKEA, designer from Mexico. That's something we cannot miss also.
So good evening, everyone, and rest well. See you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.